Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm Jeff Hansen. The show's brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. If you can't tell, I'm a little under the weather. I'm on day 4, day 5 of whatever this is that is trying to kill me. But I'm here. We're doing the Daily Dose. I'm back. And look, frankly, this is kind of a perfect illustration of how BYU played in their season opener against Sam Houston State. That's what we're going to talk about today. But first, thank you for subscribing to the show. Thank you for fueling the algorithm, everything you guys do to support the channel. I appreciate it so much. Please continue to support the channel. BYU played Sam Houston State. And boy, that was sluggish. I wish I could say, yeah, this is exactly what I said would happen, right? I talked about Sam Houston being better than people think. I talked about BYU maybe having some chemistry problems and starting off really slow. I'd love to be able to pat myself on the back and say, hey, no, this is what I expected to happen. But I didn't. I didn't expect it to happen like this. I kept thinking BYU is eventually going to figure things out and separate in the second half. They never did. The first half wasn't all that surprising to me. You know, a lot of emotions, new teammates, new scheme, new environment, a lot of pressure. Everybody has those first game jitters. First half wasn't at all surprising, but when they couldn't figure it out in the second half, that did surprise me quite a bit. So let's get into some takeaways and some details here and talk about what that game means for BYU going forward. First and foremost, it's week 1. And week 1, weird things happen. Texas Tech is a dark horse to win the Big 12. They lost in double overtime to Wyoming. Arizona State, they had a weird monsoon and lightning delay that delayed that game, but they nearly lost to Southern Utah. Baylor got beat by Texas State, got beat soundly by 2 scores. Houston just eked by UTSA. Oklahoma State only beat Central Arkansas by a couple of touchdowns. UCLA struggled against Coastal Carolina, and it wasn't until the fourth quarter that they were able to separate, and they won by 2 scores. Fresno State beat Purdue. Northern Illinois beat Boston College. Illinois took a last-second field goal to beat Toledo. And even Ohio State, they struggled. They were sluggish. They were in a dogfight with Indiana. They ended up winning by 20, figured things out a little bit in the fourth quarter. But lots of ugly football across the country. That's what week 1 is all about. You take Sam Houston State, Casey Keeler, that coaching staff for the Bearcats. They had all offseason long to prepare for BYU. And they knew what Aaron Roderick was going to do. They had 3 years worth of tape to figure out Aaron Roderick. And they went out and they did that. They took advantage of some new players. Week 1 is weird. I would caution anybody to from making conclusions in week 1, both conclusions that BYU's offense is going to be terrible and conclusions that BYU's defense is going to be elite. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but that's the caution. Don't make conclusions in week 1 because week 1 is always a little bit weird. Now, that's not to say that all is well in Provo. There are question marks galore that have to be figured out, but don't write anything in Sharpie just yet. Let's give the team a week or 2 to figure things out. All right, so let's get into some of the good stuff that happened on Saturday night. First and foremost, the defense did look different, and for me, it started with the defensive line. They were able to get 14 pressures on 41 dropbacks. That's impressive. They only were credited with 1 sack, and it was in the first drive, but Tyler Batty had 7 pressures on the night. AJ Vonkvachon, he had a few pressures as well. The defense was making things tough on the passing game. The Sam Houston State quarterback didn't have all day long to find an open receiver. He had to hurry. He had to make quick decisions, and that seemingly opened everything else up for the defense. Jacob Robinson, an obvious star. What a special playmaker he is. He was targeted 13 times by Sam Houston State and allowed just 5 completions. He had five completions, a pair of interceptions, showed off his elite open field tackling skills. Jacob Robinson is a special, special player. Eddie Heckard, same story. Really, he wasn't targeted nearly as much because he was blanketing his guy all night long. But when he was targeted, he was right there. If he allowed a reception, he quickly made a tackle, and he pulled down a pick himself. Camden Garrett was in the pocket of his receivers all night long. the BYU cornerbacks are going to be a strength for this BYU defense. Tackling across the board, completely different for BYU. Completely different for BYU. They did not miss tackles. They had hats on the ball everywhere it went. That was huge. That was a huge improvement from where they were, and maybe the most difficult thing in my eyes, given how bad BYU was at tackling these last couple of years, that was going to be a challenge for this coaching staff. And if week one is any indication of how they've done this offseason, that's maybe the story of the offseason. BYU's tackling was worlds better than it has been. And then finally on offense, LJ Martin, what a revelation he became in the second half. Now let's move into some of the bad things. Boy, really everything on offense. The offensive line struggled and struggled mightily. And if we think about that, maybe we should have expected more struggles from the offensive line than we thought that they would. Kingsley Suamataia, that was his first game at left tackle. Waylon Lapuaho, that was his first game at BYU playing left guard. Paul Maile, first game at BYU. Connor Pay, first game playing right guard. And Caleb Etienne, although he had a ton of experience at Oklahoma State, this is his first game playing right tackle. He played left tackle all year long at Stillwater. So you had 5 guys playing 5 new positions. Kingsley Suamataia, he didn't play the last couple of weeks of camp or last week or so of camp with a little nagging knee injury that wasn't serious, but it kept him off the practice field. You had Paul Maile, Connor Pay kind of bouncing back and forth between guard and center. You had Waylon Lapuaho. Did he know if he was going to play? Caleb Etienne still in a position battle with Braden Keim. And in fact, Keim got a rotation during the game. So maybe you didn't have a lot of chemistry there with that offensive line, and you kind of saw it. I mean, the offensive line looked passive. They struggled. We talked about the Sam Houston State defensive line being better than people gave it credit for, but boy, they bullied that BYU offensive line. I'm hopeful that's a result of that lack of chemistry, lack of reps, playing as that unit of 5. I think BYU has got to figure it out. I hope that Daryl Funk is rolling with that starting 5 until he's not, but don't rotate. Don't mess around with things in practice. If Connor Pay is going to play guard, have Connor play guard. Don't mix him up and rotate him at center. Let that starting 5 figure things out. And then if there's an injury, you plug somebody else in. But let those guys get comfortable with each other. It seemed like they were hesitant to get off the ball. They were thinking a lot, and that really became a story for me from everybody else. Keaton Slovis, he looked like he was a half beat slow on just about everything as well. Going through his progressions, if you're a half beat slow on read 1, a half beat slow on read 2, by the time you hit read 3, yeah, you're going to make a bad throw because read 3, you're a beat and a half slow. So everything looked a little bit passive. Aiden Robbins looked like he was a little hesitant to hit the holes. Deion Smith, a little hesitant to hit the holes. The wide receivers looked a little hesitant to hit their breaks. It was a very strange kind of slow game that it just looked like there were a bunch of offensive players who were uncomfortable, who were thinking really, really hard in that offense. The good news is that can be fixed with reps, with repetition, with time. You can gain that confidence. But what it really concerns me is, why is Keaton Slovis a half beat slow? After all the experience that he's had at college football, I wouldn't expect him to be a half beat slow. That was concerning. Why is Aiden Robbins a half beat slow? Why is Deion Smith slow? Like, why would they hesitate? I get maybe new and a lack of exposure in the offense, but these are guys that have played college football for a long time. That hesitancy was really surprising to me. I'm not ready to say that, hey, this is a sign of things to come, because the talent is still there. Everything we've talked about all offseason long is still there. They just got to get a little bit more comfortable. But how quickly does that happen? You hope it happens on Saturday against Southern Utah. There's been a lot of comparisons between this game and BYU's 2017 game against Portland State. And to me, it's a different comparison. It's not apples to apples. I get the comparison. BYU struggled against lesser competition. Here's where I think it's different. Sam Houston State is better than Portland State. I'm not going to sit here and try to claim that Sam Houston State is loaded with NFL talent and that they're going to win the conference, win Conference USA this year. They're not, but they're better than people think at certain positions. It's different than Portland State in that regard. The other thing that's different to me is Aaron Roderick has got years worth of proven offense on the field. I look at this game and I see more of a 2021 opener against Arizona than I do that 2017 opener against Portland State. If you remember, Jaren Hall, he was lackluster, threw for less than 200 yards against Arizona. And I remember walking out of the stadium in Las Vegas in 2021, and a lot of people were really lamenting that Zach Wilson went pro. There were a lot of people who really wished that Zach Wilson was still there because Jaren Hall just looked tentative. He looked a little bit slow. And keep in mind, in 2021, Jaren Hall was playing with Blake Freeland at tackle. He was playing with Brady Christensen and Blake Freeland at tackle. He was playing with Tyler Algier. He was playing with Neil Pau'u. I mean, he had a lot of NFL talent there on that team helping him and surrounding him. And he still struggled against that Arizona team that ultimately went 1-11. They were a pretty terrible defense that year. And BYU looked slow. They looked lackluster. They looked all of the things that BYU looked on Saturday night against Sam Houston State. But what happened in 2021? Well, in week 2, BYU went out and they beat Utah, who went on to win the Pac-12 conference. And then they went out and beat Arizona State the week after that. The week 1 to week 2 and week 3 improvement was immense. Jaren Hall looked like a completely different quarterback. The offensive line came together. Tyler Algier really took off and showcased how good he was going to be. It was a very different BYU offense in week 2 of 21 than they were in week 1. This feels more like what we saw against Sam Houston State, an offense that struggled, that shouldn't have struggled, playing against a team they should have blown out, but they didn't. I'm hopeful that week 1 to week 2 improvement is very similar to 2021. Because if it's more like 2017, well, what happened in that game? BYU struggled against Portland State and then played LSU and didn't cross the 50-yard line. I didn't see that kind of ineptitude from BYU on offense. I saw really slow moving, really just kind of hesitant. I mean, I don't know how else. It's really sluggish. That, I think, was coaching. That, I think, is preparation, and I think that can be fixed. I don't know, though. I mean, I'm not ready to say it's not a problem because until they fix it and prove it on tape, it's something that BYU fans, we're going to all need to be concerned about. But I do think that it can be fixed. Maybe it's the chemistry. I mean, really, if we break it down, BYU had Lapuaho, Miley, Etienne, Robbins, Slovis, Lassiter, and Marion. That's 7 guys who are brand new to this team. They've played a lot of college football, but maybe we all underestimated or underappreciated the difficulty of figuring out that chemistry when 7 of your starters were playing college football for different teams last year. Maybe that's going to take a little bit longer than we expected. It's fortunate that BYU wasn't opening up against Tennessee. Instead, they opened up against Sam Houston State. There's still time to figure it out, but the clock is ticking, and my caution meter has moved from green, where I'm not worried at all, to a very solid yellow. And if BYU struggles again this week, then I think it's time to start hitting that panic button. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hopefully tomorrow my voice is a little more voicey. Until next time, give them hell.